All right, welcome. This is going to be kind of I would say a totally deep dive on Hotel California, but it's still we were going to look at when it was made, who made it, where it reached on Billboard charts, and kind of my own perspective on what the lyrics mean via interviews that I've watched done by done by the Eagles, and done by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Let's kind of hop right on in. So, real quick, this is the album cover of Hotel California. I don't remember really the first time I heard this song, but whenever I hear the opening lines, I know instantly what the song is, and I'm filled with memories from my childhood working on old vehicles and chilling with my own dad, because my dad is a big fan of the Eagles. That first part, as we'll go in a little bit later in this presentation, is was the first part ever really written the for the song itself. It's still its own staple to this day. That really, whenever you hear it, it just brings memories of loss and really of like an eeriness of anything around. Okay, but this, like I said, this was when it first came out. It hit number one. It is actually in the top five longest songs ever to hit number one on Billboard as a single and as its own album. And it was very successful internationally too. I think it was in number seven. It reached number seven internationally, but it was definitely in the top 10 international charting. Okay, but the writers of the song, it was a huge band collective writing it. All the guys pitched in, and it was the Eagles, like I've stated earlier. The Eagles, one of my favorite bands, and uh, it was really Hotel California was their fifth album. This was them, in my opinion. They were starting to veer away from being like a pure country rock band, where it would be rock and roll but with country elements, such as their first album, Take It Easy, which had a banjo, had a mandolin in the back, and it had a more country twang to it. Hotel California is a step away from the traditional country that we know from the time period, and introduced more of a Latin type beat to it. Okay, the band members. Here's a picture of them as of 1976. You have Don Henley, who's on the drums and one of the lead singers. Glenn Fry, who was rhythm guitar. Glenn Fry and Don Henley are also the founders. They're co-founders of the Eagles, and they both everybody here could sing. Their harmonization was one of the things that made them stand out. You have Joe Walsh, who played the solo guitar, lead guitar, and in some solos you hear from the Eagles, it is just purely Joe Walsh or his co-guitar player Don Felder. And then you have, at the time of recording Hotel California, was Randy Meisner as the bass player, but later on he left in '77, and the band picked up Tim Schmidt later from a band called Poco. Randy Meisner also came from Poco too, and Poco is responsible for songs such as Crazy Love. It was more of a country, just kind of a smaller band. Wasn't as big as the Eagles were, but both Randy Meisner and Tim Smith played for Poco, and it's just a very interesting convenience. Okay, but the creation, it was Don Felder back in '75 when he was renting out a home in Malibu. He was just chilling, playing his 12-string guitar, just playing riffs, and he would get his recorder and he'd just start playing. and he had the descending beat as we heard in the first page, and it was just he just liked it. He recorded it, and then when he finally met up again with Don Henley and the rest of the gang, he gave Don Henley the tape recorder, and he's like, "Listen to this, and let me see what you like, and we can make songs from it." And a couple days later, Don Henley called Don Felder up again, and he's like, "I really like the Latin beat, the Latin reggae beat," to put in quotations, and they kind of were going for it. And Don Felder was more jazz trained, so when he did these solos, he really didn't remember them. So as they were creating it, they were just kind of dinking off a little bit in the recording studio, and Don Felder was going off, still playing in that Latinized beat, but not playing exactly what he played in that early jam session in '75. Then Don Henley and Glenn Frey came into the booth and was like, "No, you got to play exactly what was on that. That was good. That's what we want." So Don Felder had to take the tape recordings. Well, he was in Miami at the recording. He had to call his home, and his housekeeper had to go find the tape, find the actual sample, and over the phone had to sit there and relearn the opening line. And that's how they first recorded the opening for the whole opening. But Glenn Frey and Don Henley kind of took that and ran off with the lyrics. We'll go in a little bit with the lyrics later, but they purposely kept it vague for anybody's interpretation. Okay, music style, I've already gone in a little bit. The Latin beat, minor. It was originally written in E minor, just because it was an easier minor for a guitar. He was just having fun, just jamming out. But they had to lower it to B minor for Don Henley's voice. It fit his range a little better. He is the lead singer on this track. And yeah, it was vague, ambiguous, just kind of it was a hit on the music industry. Okay, they wrote this in the time of the '70s, and as you can see in this picture here, it is the ending part where it's just purely the solo between Joe Walsh and Glenn Frey. Joe Walsh and Glenn Frey had this chemistry that they could really play off of each other really well. And before either of them joined the Eagles, Joe Walsh was a solo artist, and Don Felder would, not Glenn Frey, I said Glenn Frey, my bad. Don Felder would go on to the show there and play, and they do this like battle of the guitars where they would try to one up each other. And when they were recording it, Don Felder was going for that, but Joe Walsh was like, "No, let's keep the style going. This is more of a duet type thing." And kind of the pinnacle of this solo is here. We'll play it here in a sec, and it's one of my favorite parts, is when they're both playing and you can hear the guitars harmonizing. And not only with the solos, but if you heard a little bit, you could hear the bass playing along with it in the back. Randy Meisner, Tim Smith really kind of filled in that role to kind of emphasize the solo. You had Don Henley on the drums going along with it. They emphasized certain points. You could hear that pull, like, okay, here's a climax, now we're backing off, so the guitars could really jam out and go off with it. But this song, as I said, was written in the '70s. In the '70s, a lot of bands were around, and a lot of them, pretty much hardly any, bands were all purely from California. I mean, Don Henley was from Texas. Glenn Frey, I think, was from Minnesota. I might get those two mixed up. But Joe Walsh would go on to say that California was becoming a hotel for like these people. It was just from all over the place, and it was home, but it wasn't. It had that quite eeriness behind it. How it just wasn't home, but it felt like home, like most hotels try to be. And on TV, California had this glamour. I mean, Beverly Hills was just this magical place where miracles could happen. You have shows such as Fall Guy, um, Beverly Hills 90210. This even went in through up until the 90s and the 2000s, where California was the place to be. And as they were in this world, they could see the cracks. And you could see this in the song. Okay, in the first verse, it's optimistic. The main character comes in after a long drive, coming to a place, and in the line, he said, "This could be heaven or this could be hell." He's optimistic. It's like it could be great, but it's not quite there, and it's only like two lines later the chorus comes in, which comes into this more major key that makes you feel a little bit better about everything. It's sort of a reassuring, like, hey, everything is not that bad. But as we get into the second verse, you can see cracks forming into this vision. The first line, it's talking about this girl who's Tiffany twisted. She's got a Mercedes Benz. She's materialistic. She just wants and wants. She's got a lot of pretty boys, a lot of arm candy all around. And the main character just calls for wine, something simple that a nice glamorous hotel should have accessible to. But the guy he asks was like, "Oh, we haven't had that in a while." It was an empty promise that you would think a hotel would have wine, but it doesn't. And this is kind of how it was in the 70s, going in just after the civil rights movement and Woodstock and Jimi Hendrix. Everyone was fighting the power. The Vietnam War was over to an end. And it was kind of a letdown, like, what do we fight for now? Vietnam's over. Our boys are home. What should we do now? And you're seeing these cracks on how the music industry was just going to materialistic because there's nothing to fight for. So they were living in excess. Drugs were rampant. Alcoholism was rampant. And no one emphasizes better than Joe Walsh. After the Eagles broke up, Joe Walsh wrote this song called Life's Been Good. And it's basically about him telling a story of, hey, life's been good to me, and this is all the crazy stuff I've done. Joe Walsh was known for trashing hotel rooms, and there are hotels to this day that have Joe Walsh banned for life because he destroyed the hotel room. One hotel, he racked up $50,000 worth of damages. And it was just because of this lifestyle of, we've got all this excess, what now? But the pinnacle of the lyrical side of Hotel California comes from the very last line. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. The Eagles at this time were very frustrated with the label that they were with, because the label was taking the majority of the money they were making. They were making millions of dollars, but they were seeing very little of it. And they were under contract. So, yeah, the contract, yeah, you can stop making music, but your music stays with us. And you could leave the music industry, but can you? It's part of them. It's part of their personality. They can hear it on the radio, and it's still part of them. And this line, in all the other theories of, oh, it's about drugs or it's about leaving something behind, all use this exact line as the person is trapped. For drugs, oh, all this stuff, you can see it's bad. It's good at first, you see the cracks, it gets really bad later, but you can never leave that addiction behind. My theory, along with it, is the labeling companies. Is you can check out, but you can never leave. Because at the time, the Eagles, they have their own record label now, but back then they didn't. They were just young adults trying to live their best dream, trying to be like their heroes, trying to create music and have fun. But it was not to be seen. And this is why I really love Hotel California, is because of this, because it just resonates. And you have this long solo at the end, so it feels like it's the exact middle, but it's the end of the song. Like there's always something more to it at the end. And this is my presentation of Hotel California and why I like it so much. And if you have any questions, please let me know.